If you want an easy to play opening against e4 that actually works, the Caro Kann is your best friend. It helps me hit 2,000 on chess.com, and today I'll show you the exact lines I use and then play them live against viewers. Let's jump into theory. So, Caro Kann is against e4. If they don't go e4, you can't use it. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. And we respond on c6. Now, you'll most likely see pawn d4. This is the base position, but if you're a lower level, you might get a whole slew of different moves. But we're gonna go over d4, then we go pawn d5. Now, as you can see from the computer arrows, this is our branch off point. There's a lot of things they can do. They can take the pawn, they can push the pawn, they can get their knight out, they can get their other knight out. We're going to go over each of these variations, but let's start off with the advanced variation because it is the most testing. So the advance is when your opponent pushes the pawn to e5. And here I recommend getting the bishop out to f5. There's another move with pawn c5. I don't recommend it. I think it's a lot more difficult and complex. And if you want an easy to use system, go bishop f5. And there's one trap we need to be aware of in this situation, and that is when the opponent goes pawn h4. And the reason this is a trap is if we make a normal developing move and go pawn e6, we're going to get our bishop trapped due to the move pawn g4. And no matter where we move the bishop, we are going to get trapped. If we move back, they're going to push their h-pawn. In our last remaining square on e4, they're going to push their f-pawn, and we have nowhere to go. We're going to lose the bishop. So that is a trap to be aware of. So my recommendation is a little unorthodox in this position. When your opponent goes h4, first of all, they probably have a line prepared. They're going to know a little more than you. I recommend going bishop d7 because this gives you a classic Caro Kann position, and it's not complex, and it takes your opponent out of theory. So just to demonstrate how this opening would actually work in live time, let's say the opponent develops normally. Our goal is to go pawn e6, and eventually we're going to attack the center. Let's say they go knight f3. We're going to go pawn c5. They're probably going to defend with the pawn. We have a very easy development square with our knight. They could get their other knight out. They need to be very careful about losing this pawn. We can go queen b6. And already in a position like this, they are in a lot of trouble. And the moves are not entirely intuitive for the opponent. But for us, we have super easy ideas for developing. We're going to get our pieces out. We're going to castle, and we're going to have a very pleasant game versus the opponent has to come up with a pretty complex game plan to figure out how to address situations like this. So I'm not going to go too deep into theory here because honestly, there isn't a lot of theory, which is good for you because this will get your opponent out of prep and you'll get a position that you're used to if you play the Caro Kann a lot because it's very similar to the exchange or other variations. So let's back up to main Caro Kann theory. All right, so we went over the h4 sideline. Now let's go into main theory. And I do quickly want to call out, there's about 30 different lines of main theory. I'm more of a conceptual learner and teacher. So if that's not your thing, there are 5-hour YouTube videos out there. There are books you can read, but I'm going to focus more on a conceptual basis because that's how I think you should learn, and then just watch game reviews and see what you could have done better. Anyways, a common move in the advanced is knight f3. This is actually the most common move. And our game plan is to push this e-pawn. Quickly want to call out, players at a lower level will go after this bishop with the knight, but they will hang their knight, so be aware of that. The normal move you will see in these positions is knight d2, and we want to continue our plan, and you might be seeing a common theme at this point of going pawn c5, attacking center. Now, they might go pawn c3 to defend, but I do also want to call out this check is not dangerous. We could block on knight d7. We could block on knight c6. And you might be wondering why this is fine. If you want to avoid any complications and not allow your pawns to be doubled and deal with any shenanigans here, this is actually good for black. But if you don't want to deal with a more difficult pawn to use, then I recommend just going knight d7. And when they develop normally, we can always kick out that bishop with a6 and get it out of there. The advance does not really have an issue with the light square bishop checks. When we get into the exchange theory, I'll go into that a bit more. Okay, let's say they defend with the pawn. We want to get our knight out. They could go bishop e2. They could pin us. Doesn't really matter. And eventually, we do want to take this pawn. This is usually a good time. And the way you know when to take the pawn is when you feel like you can't really develop anymore. So in this particular position, it's our move. If we get our knight out to e7, they can just take the pawn, and that's bad for us, obviously. And similarly, this dark squared bishop can only go to e7, but if you look, now this knight has nowhere to go. So this is a good indication. It's time to trade the pawn. So let's just demonstrate that real quick. They would take the knight, and now here is where you need to be aware of the light square bishop checks. If we make an offhand move like bishop e7, we don't have any way to block it, and now we have to move our king, and we have lost castling rights, and that is clearly bad for us. So to avoid that, you could get your knight out, and now if they check us, we have knight c6 to block. But what I like to do is just throw in a very simple pawn a6 move. It stops any problems on the right side of the board, and you're looking very, very good. So trading is good, and then our development is pretty standard. We just want to get our knight out. Another common move is to go pawn h6, and the reason for that is if the knight ever goes to f3 and eventually tries to make its way over to h4 to trade, we always have this pocket on the left side of the board to hide our pieces. And I'm not really going over the plans to attack, as you can tell, because they happen pretty naturally just based on the way your opponent plays. The bishop typically goes to e3. But first and foremost, you just want to focus on getting castled, and then we can focus on creating a game plan. And I'm clearly going over a sample line in this position, but here we can defend with the rook. And now the opponent has to come up with a plan. And let me tell you, this plan for the opponent is not easy to make. Our plans are much simpler. We can kick out the bishop. We can get our queen out to b6, put some more pressure on the center. And we have a lot more open lines where the opponent is actually pretty cramped for space. And we have a super solid pawn structure. We have both the bishops, and if they ever want to trade the bishops, we're more than happy to accept that trade because their light square bishop is actually better than ours. Just to demonstrate, they could take the bishop, we'd get our queen out, and we're looking at a very pleasant position here, and a lot of the positions you get with the Caro Kann are pleasant like this. So just to quickly recap the advanced variation, I know I went over a lot there and not a lot of actual straight lines because there's so many different variations you'll run into in the advanced. This is a very common move, and like I said, we go pawn e6. If they ever go knight c3, just know in the back of your head this is a bad move, and the reason this is a bad move is because our plan is to attack the center, and when they go knight c3, that means a pawn can't be on c3, because typically when we take the center, they want to be able to take back with a pawn. So that is conceptually why knight c3 is a bad move. It often gets stuck. So typically your opponents will go knight d2. And just to recap, just get our pieces out. This check isn't scary. We can go knight d7. If they take, we take back. But then they're just going to play normally. And you usually know when to take this pawn if you can't develop anymore. So we could take here, and they could take back with the knight. And then now we're defending the bishop with the knight, and we're in a good spot. So that's really the advanced variation. I hope that showed you where to get your pieces out to. The game plan is a little harder to come up with depending on what the opponent does. Typically, you'll just win naturally. You'll win a pawn, and then you can get the game into an endgame. The Caro Kann is very positionally, and it's very, very easy to play. Okay, so we went over the advanced variation. What if instead of pushing the pawn, they decide to take the pawn? Well, that is called the exchange variation. If they take, we always take back. And my main recommendation, if they do this, no matter what they do, our first move will be knight f6. So unless they check us, of course. If they check us, just block with the light square bishop and trade the bishops. But let's say they go bishop d3 instead. We're going to go knight f6, and just some common moves are knight f4. And just be wary of these light squared bishop checks in the exchange. They're a lot more dangerous than they are in the advance. We get a little careless. But I recommend pinning the knight when you can to get the light square bishop out. The biggest problem in the exchange is developing this light square bishop. Let's go over a line where they prevent us from developing. You'll notice you can't get the light square bishop out here. So if your opponent does this, what we're actually going to do is fianchetto the bishop. So we fianchetto the bishop, and this is theory, and we're getting into some territory where you'll need to dive pretty deep into moves if you want to know everything, but I'm just going to show you the concepts. We fianchetto the bishop. Let's say they castle. We castle ourselves. They can go pawn c3, and the main move I'm getting to is bishop f5, and if they trade the bishops, again, you might be wondering, how the hell is this good for black? It just is, which is a really shitty answer, but it just is. It doesn't look good, but computers have gotten so good to the point where no matter what the opponent does, we have a pretty good position. The F knight will eventually have this square on e4. We're going to slide our king over, and we're going to put a rook on g8, get our knight out, and try to attack the white king on the left side of the board. This is a pretty rare sideline. I'm not going to go into it, but what you need to know is in the opening, if they don't allow you to develop your bishop in the exchange variation, you want to fianchetto your dark squared bishop and trade the bishop. And this is where game review will come very handy, because you're going to get a lot of different variations at this point. I don't think it's worth memorizing, but you may disagree with me. But anyways, let's dive into more of the main theory. We get our knight out. They get their knight out. We're going to get both our knights out. They're going to probably castle. I recommend always pinning if you can. We're probably going to push their pawn. We're going to go pawn e6, the typical Caro Kann move. And something to note, if they defend with the knight and we make a couple more moves and they go queen e3, they're attacking this b pawn. My recommendation in these sort of positions is to actually slide the queen to c8. Any other square is a little awkward. You don't really want to go to c7. Some people disagree, but this dark squared bishop can attack you in a lot of cases, and you can get a pretty unpleasant position. I think it's better c8 and stay on the light squares, plus you avoid any knight issues on d7. And if they ever go knight e5, we want to take the knight. One of white's main plans is to either plant a knight or somehow get the dark squared bishop to e5 and really control that square. All right, I just went over a lot. Some other common themes. Let's just say they continued to develop with, I don't know, h3. We typically want to trade the light squared bishop for the knight. And that's pretty counterintuitive if played other openings or just heard general chess advice that bishops are typically better than knights. Not in this case. This light squared bishop for us isn't doing anything in the exchange. We want to trade it, and that's a one less piece that can end up on e5. So that's how I recommend you think about it. All in the exchange variation, e5 is a very, very dangerous square. But yeah, this is the typical development. Some common plans in these openings are a a6. We're going to push on the right side of the board. This knight can go to a5 to c4. We can put a rook on e8 and start pushing down the center of the board. We're out of the opening at this point. I'm not going to go over all of these ideas, but this is how you get your pieces out in the exchange. And let's back up. There's one other variation in the exchange I would like to cover, and that is the Panov, and it is the scariest opening to go against for black, especially for beginners. And even if you study it, you are going to get crushed for the first 5 games, I promise you, because it is so difficult to play. They take, we take back. No matter what they do, like I said, we will get our knight out, even if they play the Panov. The Panov is on c4. On first glance, this is really, really scary. We go knight f6 always, and they're going to go knight c3, maximizing pressure on this pawn. My recommendation is to go pawn e6 against these cases. This is one of the only cases where the light squared bishop, we're willingly locking it in jail. If they push the pawn here, like, we're fine. We're pretty happy with that, because we now have easy development, and they lost this tension on our center pawn, and they can never really break up our center anymore. But when they keep this tension, it's pretty scary because it's hard for us to develop. They take, also, we're happy. We take with the knight. They attack us with the bishop. No worries. We just trade. We don't even need to trade. We could just get our bishop out. And if they ever do trade, take with the pawn. They can't take again, and we're going to get castled. Our light square bishop has some open files, and we have easy development from there. So I recommend playing this as passive as possible against the Panov. Just want to defend with the pawn and lock the light squared bishop in. And something to note is if they ever move their light square bishop, you can always throw in this take the pawn move, because that means they wasted a tempo with their last move and they have to take bishop again. But this does get a little scary. They have pawn d5 pushes somewhere in here along the lines. So like I said before, just play it passive, get your pieces out. And if you can neutralize the attack, you'll get a completely equal position, do some normal development, maybe go after this bishop, get castled, and so on. Last line I'm going to call out is the fantasy variation. If you're not aware of it, you're probably not going to see it very often, but if you do, you should at least be aware of what it is. I recommend watching a deep theory video if you really want to dive into it, because it can be very, very tricky. And the way I play it, I don't recommend that beginners play it, but it's when the opponent goes pawn f3. In this position, how I play it is I take the pawn, they take back, we go pawn e5. Reason being, if they take the pawn, we trade the queens. And now the opponent has to go knight f3. If they don't do that, for instance, if they go pawn a3, we have this really disgusting check. And if they try to block with the pawn, take the e-pawn with check. And no matter what they do, we're going to win the rook. So for that reason, they have to go knight f3, in which case we will pin the knight and they will now go bishop or c4. And this position is full of traps. If we make a lackluster move, like getting our knight out to f6, you might not even realize why this is a mistake on first glance, but it's a very common trap. They will then sack their bishop on f7, and when we take back, they will take our e-pawn with check. They'll be double attacking our light squared bishop. We'll have to move our king. We can't castle. We're down a piece. We're down a pawn, and we're just in really, really bad shape, completely losing. So for that reason, we have to go knight d7. And there's a lot of moves here. I recommend just getting the knights out first, but we're not scared of them taking the e-pawn. Reason being, if they take the e-pawn, we throw in this check on b6. They have to move. They have nothing to block except the rook, which is obviously bad. And we have knight takes e5, double attacking the knight. They'll back up. We can attack the queen with our rook, and we have a very pleasant position. So that's a reason why they shouldn't take the pawn. And if they just continue doing nothing, for instance, if they pin us and break the pin, same case, if they take, we check them. They might get their knight out, we'll castle, and here we have a game. And I'm not going to go deep into the fantasy variation. I'm not an expert on it, and it's super, super complicated. Let's go over some sidelines that I didn't cover. So e4, and a lot of beginners are worried, hey, what if they don't go pawn d4? Then we're not in any variations that we went over. Well, yeah, but it's not a problem. And let me show you why. If they go knight f3, for instance, we go pawn d5 anyways. And if they take and we take back, look at that. We just transposed into the exchange variation. If they don't take back and they push, we can get our bishop out and we push our pawn. Look at that. We transposed into the advanced variation. So most of these transpose, there are some caveats to it. There's a reason I said that if you want every 150 lines of the Caro Kann, you're better off reading a book and studying theory. But again, I don't think that's the way to learn. It's way better and easier to learn the concepts and just watch game reviews, and you'll improve that way. But anyways, we have 2 viewer games we need to get to demonstrate how this opening actually works in live time. So let's dive into those. All right, and we're playing ranked 900 Josh 11 as our first viewer game. He's been instructed to play e4, but besides that, they're on their own. And if you want to be my opponent in one of these games, just join the Discord in the description. We of course respond pawn c6. This is the start of our Caro Kann setup. And now we go pawn d5. Josh 11 decides to take, which is the Caro Kann exchange variation, and they just simply get out their knight. Against this, I recommend just developing your own knights. Knight f6 is easiest because it defends the center pawn, and let's get out our other knight. So they decide to pin us. Whenever your opponent pins you, I recommend going bishop d7 just to avoid any tricks with knight e5. I think it's the easiest and by far the simplest. So let's do just that. And what I like to do is go pawn a6 and ask this bishop, what is it going to do? They decide to back up. Let's attack it again. And if they attack the pawn again, they have 2 attackers. We have 1 defender. Our bishop is underdeveloped. You might see where I'm going with this. Let's pin the knight on f3. They try to take us, or they try to attack our light square bishop. Let's actually trade that knight. I don't have a great reason for taking that knight, but typically in the Caro Kann, the f knight is really strong and our light square bishop isn't that strong. And their light square bishop is pretty much locked up on the right side of the board, so I'm not too worried about it. They go bishop e3, which isn't the best move. It's really passive if you look at it. Let's go bishop e7, just play super thematically and simple. And here we can castle. So now it's, what are we doing now? We need to come up with a plan. I don't want to trade the knights. We could maybe reroute the knight and go for a pawn push. We could keep pushing the pawns on the right side of the board, which I actually really like. So let's go for that. Let's go knight a5 and go after this light square bishop. Let's slide our rook into c8. We could even ignore the light square bishop and just go knight c4 and then slide our other knight to d5. This is the hardest part of the Caro Kann, is once you're actually out of the opening, like what exactly is the plan? Because it's not entirely intuitive what to do at this point. Let's go rook c8, simply taking an open file, and our opponent goes after our bishop or our knight. I don't really want to allow that to happen. Let's go knight d7, asking this bishop what it's doing there. If it's going to stay there, if it's going to leave. It's a pretty scary bishop. This e5 square is the most dangerous square in the Caro Kann. Your opponent can usually take advantage of it pretty easily. And they go all the way back. A little shocking. Okay, let's continue our plan. Go knight c4. They might take. They take. I'm actually going to take with the pawn. Actually, let's take with the rook. We put our rook there for a reason, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Our opponent needs to start making some meaningful moves if they're going to attack us, because right now we're getting everything we want. We have bishop b4 incoming. Maybe we could even go on b4. And I'm going to make a 1-move threat against the queen, but our knight is underdeveloped now since the last couple moves we made. And let's see where this queen wants to go. I'm expecting it just to slide right back to f3. Typically, opponents should not go knight c3. They should go knight d2, for the simple reason that this knight gets kind of stuck here. All right, let's pin their knight to their rook, and my idea is we have knight e4 incoming. I don't think that stops the idea, so let's do it anyways. We're triple attacking this knight. We're not winning it, but we are causing a lot of pressure. All right, let's take the knight. That should cause doubled pawns at the very least, which it does. And I'm going to show how to win an endgame, assuming our opponent trades with us. So let's offer a queen trade. I'm going to take back with the knight. I'm going to double up the rooks because we've created a weakness for their c-pawn. And now we can simply simplify the game and go after their weakness. They can't defend everything, I don't think. That was a pretty good move. I actually missed that move. Let's go rook c8. And then if they decide to defend with rook e3, we're eventually going to get our knight around to d7, b6, all the way to a4, and we should eventually win this pawn. And at the very least, I think we can always slide our rook over to a4 and simply win this a pawn. Probably a better move. So let's just do that. We're clearly out of the opening at this point. We've been out of the opening for quite a while. That bishop move helps us, because actually that does not help us. I don't want to. It probably could have gone e6 there. I didn't really see that until just now. Okay, let's take the free a pawn. That gives us a runner. They trade the bishop for our knight, which is a good trade for us. Let's stop any movement. Get our king out of there. And I want to start trading pieces. They go rook e5. I don't know what that does. I think that just hangs a pawn. Let's take. And again, I'm trying to force off a rook here. We force one off. We're going to win the c pawn. This rook isn't attacking anything. If they go h5, move our king. All right, let's go g7. And let's hide our king on h8. It doesn't look very great, but we're too fast on the right side of the board for it to matter. Take. Push the pawn, get this rook out of there. Move our king over. And they can win this pawn. I don't really care. We're going to promote before they can do anything. We push the pawn. They have to go rook b7, and we're going to check them and make a queen. They are one square too slow, unfortunately. They don't address it. Let's promote to a rook, and that will just be checkmate. Good game to Josh 11, and let's do a very, very fast recap of this game. What percentage did we play? We played 92%, so very solid game. Caro Kann, exchange. We get our knights out. They developed normally. I recommend blocking the pin with the bishop, taking out that bishop, and then developing the bishop. You typically don't want this bishop to stay outside of the pawn chain. So that is the reasoning there. We trade the knight. As you can see, that's a best move. I don't really have a great explanation for that, but you typically want to trade that bishop for that knight. And we developed very normally. We went after the bishop. We got our rook on an active square. We got our knight on an active square. Took back with the rook. Back to the knight. Traded down to an endgame. Won some pawns, and then just won an endgame. Nothing really fancy to be said here, but that's the goal, right? Like, you can play this opening, and it's not hard to play. So hopefully that was a good demonstration. Let's get our next viewer game. Okay, and we got our viewer game against Yefeng. It's a 1374, and we'll be playing the Caro Kann as they go e4. So let's go pawn c6, just like we showed in theory. They go pawn d4, and we're going to respond with pawn d5, and this is our starting position. And they decide to take, so this is the exchange variation. And like I said in theory, we just take back. That's why it's called the exchange. And I recommend going knight f6, just reinforcing this pawn as much as possible to start the game. And remember, if they ever throw in a check, we can always block with the bishop. We can also block with the knight, but I think blocking with the bishop is slightly better. Let's just get our other knight out. They pin us. Again, no problem. We just block it with the bishop. And they go bishop d3, as I think this is mainline Caro Kann exchange. Let's go bishop g4, pin their knight to their king, and they attack us. Okay, so we can back up here. And if they attack us again, we back up again, and that would offer a trade of the light squared bishops, which we're more than happy to do. That's actually a great trade for us. They pin our knight, which is interesting. I don't know if that's a good move. I'm going to go pawn e6 anyway, and basically say I'm not scared of this pin. We always have bishop e7 if needed, and they attack our bishop, so that makes our life pretty easy. We just go bishop g6, we offer the trade, and we don't really even need to take here. Okay, that's super interesting. I don't know. I don't think this pawn's actually hanging because they can then take our bishop. So how should we approach this? I think let's just continue developing, or we can't take the knight because then they take with the pawn and we lose a piece. Yeah, let's just continue developing. We're a little behind in development, so I want to get our pieces out. I'm willing to take the concession of them taking our knight and us taking back with the pawn, or losing the bishop pair just to get this started. Okay, so they allow us to take their knight now, which I think I will do. A general rule of thumb is you don't want a knight to stay on e5 against the Caro Kann because it's just a really, really powerful square in general. Anyways, let's go knight d7, retreat our knight from the pawn, attack the pawn, and we're also attacking the bishop. So they should trade with us here is what I'm expecting. We take with the queen, and yeah, if they're not careful, they're going to allow some pretty nasty checks on h4, which I will just take. Okay. I think here, maybe knight c5. I don't want to get our bishop trapped is the only thing. Let's trade the bishops first. And we could go queen f2 and then take the f pawn. I think a slightly more solid move is to go knight c5 first, because now we have that check anyways, and we're still attacking d pawn. And our opponent just hangs his queen, which is a little unfortunate. So let's take the queen, and this game's essentially over. Yeah, we just have to figure out how to checkmate. I think rook c8 is probably fine, but this is just a matter of technique at this point. Let's throw in a check. Let's push the pawn. And it should be checkmate here somewhere. Check them on e3. And we have a nice way to end this game. We can actually sack the queen. So let's do it. Let's go queen c1 and take the rook with the rook. And that is checkmate. Now you know how to use the Caro Kann. So go out there, get some wins. Let me know how it goes. But until then, I will see you next time.